begin tonight in West Lafayette. Final score, Purdue 87, Iowa 68. So Purdue responds from the loss to Northwestern against an Iowa team that does not defend. Doug, I'd ask you to react to this game, but it seems pretty carbon copy of what we probably expected from this type of a game. Not sure if anything stood out to you from this game, but I guess my question to you would be the Northwestern game for Purdue. How much did that get your eyebrows to raise? And what's your overarching opinion on Purdue and how you view this season for them and this team?
All right, I think this is a fascinating discussion, okay? Because the prevailing wisdom on how to beat Purdue has been, you got to have athletic guards that get into Braden Smith, that can speed him up, and then if you're going to beat Edey, right, drag him away from the basket with the shooting five, and then you got to figure out how you're going to defend him. And like Boo Buie's a good player, but it's not like he's some elite defender. Northwestern, they move it really well. They're expertly coached in terms of ball, player movement. And what they wanted to get was Edey defending ball screens and a shot clock where you get Buie. And they let him take a lot of those middies, those mid-range floaters, which, so many coaches nowadays, they look at the analytics and say that's not a great shot, but for Buie it is. And then they just threw bodies at Edey. Lots of bodies at him. He fouled out, 3 guys? And so I felt like Northwestern's plan is very Northwestern specific. And Iowa, it's not a good matchup for them. You mentioned they don't defend. They're struggling in terms of finding some scoring balance as well. But in terms of the Purdue Northwestern game, and Randolph, I'm really interested in your opinion. I feel like when you watch a program 2 years in a row execute a similar game plan and have a win, granted on your own home floor, but it wasn't like they got every call, right? Like I thought Purdue got a pretty fair shake on the road officiating wise. I think it's a new style, or a style that is different than many of us conceived would be able to bring down Purdue. And I think it's interesting. Again, it's NBA style or European style, where they move it several passes, trying to get downhill and, trying to make sure that Edey is active. And I think it's obviously very, very effective.
It worked for them this particular game. They also created 17 turnovers, and I think it had more to do with Purdue than Northwestern per se. Pressure defense, I'd say. I think it was more Purdue having careless turnovers and just not valuing the ball, but forcing some things inside. Hey, let's give Northwestern credit. If you don't think Boo Buie had a All-American type performance, he looked like that dude. He was, he stepped up, had a game performance, and it happens. Nobody expected Purdue to go undefeated. The blueprint it's going to be the same for everybody. It's whether you can pull it off. You got to get Zach out of the lane. You got to attack the lane. Try to get him in foul trouble. If not, you don't have a chance. I think the biggest thing that's impressive is you got to make mid-range shots, because getting to the rim on them is difficult. And Boo Buie, that's like you said, that's his game. Can you do it when it matters in March? That's going to be the key. Those type of matchups. Iowa tried it a little bit tonight. It did not work. It wasn't successful at all. So I'm not down on Iowa. I don't think it's anything other than a blip in the road that's going to happen a couple times this year for them. I don't see them losing any more than about 5 games, if that.
Here's my question. Doug Gottlieb, if I gave you chips on the table and said you pick which side to go on in a 4th row, better chance that Purdue is a first weekend exit, meaning they could win a game and lose, or a better chance that this team can make it all the way to Arizona to a Final Four? Which side you betting on?
I think better chance to make it to the Final Four this year. I would say this, and this is stick with me for a second. I know I'm a little bit long-winded. Okay, when Virginia lost to UMBC, I remember having a conversation with Tony Bennett, and I said, and afterwards, so many of us who've known Tony called him to console him, and he was more kind of in learning mode, like what happened? How did this all happen? And obviously, you lose your best NBA talent as a power forward. It's going to change you. But what I said was like, look, when you tried to go small in the second half to match up with UMBC, had you ever played that lineup before? And he was like, no. And I said, well, like, Tony, like, I hate to break it to you, but you're going to make the NCAA tournament every year now. You're at Virginia, you got it rolling. Play left-handed sometimes. Try some things. And I say that because like they play Edey as often as they can. And I would vary some lineups. I would give some different looks. What would it look like if Edey's in foul trouble? What would it look like if Braden Smith is in foul trouble? Braden Smith was hurt. Like, to me, they should use the next month and a half again, it doesn't have to be whole games, but for wars, as they're called in many college basketball circles, right? Those 4-minute stanzas. Like, let's see what it looks like to play without a point guard, just in case. Let's see what it looks like to play without a point guard and a big guy, to see how we can function. And then you factor in, I think, what Randolph was talking about, which is, yes, some of it was self-inflicted, but a lot of it is Braden Smith's kind of their only true guard that they put out there. Like, they don't have multiple ball handlers in most of their lineups the way that a lot of college teams do. If we go through the list of all the teams in the top 10, top 15, the one thing most of them have, yes, they have quality point guard play, but they got a secondary ball handler, maybe even a tertiary ball handler, and they don't have that. So, again, if you ask the question, my answer is I think they're more likely to go to the Final Four than they are to lose in the first weekend. There's no doubt their booty cheeks are going to be super tight that first game. Okay, but we saw this from Villanova, right, where they couldn't get out of the first weekend. And then they finally broke through. By the way, I believe it was against Iowa, and they kicked the crap out of Iowa in the second game on the way to their first national championship. So it's just going to take a breakthrough from that first weekend. This is a really good club. They have plenty of scoring, plenty of defense. They're very well coached. I think it's more likely they end up in the Final Four than it is lose first weekend.
I think they'll end up in the Final Four, and I'm willing to push my chips to the table with that because, Doug, if I had to push back a little bit, I think Lance Jones is that guy for them. I think he's the secondary ball handler for them, the physical guard, strong guard, able to guard an athletic guard on the perimeter. He's shown that already. I think two things they've shown, and that was the biggest thing I thought they had to get, was another guy to help initiate offense. I think they checked that box. He's shown that with the schedule that they had. I don't think they're in the position they're in right now without him. The other thing I think we've gotten to see even a little bit tonight, when Zach Edey went out, they extended the lead. And we watched him a couple of times during the year. I think the biggest thing that they're experimenting with that they're able to do this year is play without him being in the game. He doesn't get in foul trouble, but they're able to sit him down and continue to hold on to leads or even extend leads like they did to that. That's why I'm so high on Purdue. And I think, again, I don't think he gets enough credit for being a defensive player of the year. I think he completely controls the paint. And I see this team. I'd be shocked if this team isn't in Phoenix, but I do think their more difficult matchups will be that first round only because they'll play a mid-major school with probably a stretch five at center.